You went from pizza delivery boy to internationally published photographer. What role did your Buddhist practice play in that transformation?
Well, I have to mention that when the reason I became a pizza delivery boy is I had experienced, just prior to that, a massive, devastating bankruptcy. At that point in my life, I had been practicing Buddhism for 2 decades. So I had already begun to function from a level of not blaming the environment for whatever suffering I might be experiencing. In this particular case, there was a downturn in the economy which triggered the bankruptcy. So because of my Buddhist understanding, and I developed this not just from a standpoint of an intellectual understanding, but from battling so many difficulties and obstacles during this 2 decades, I had begun to build this internal fortitude and strength. And I knew, not only intellectually, but really from the core of my life, that it was from this devastating circumstances that actually provided an amazing opportunity to rebirth myself, to start all over and to go create a life that, that I'd always dreamed about, right? So the bankruptcy didn't really, no one wants to go through bankruptcy and lose everything they own and their home and their car and all this and, go from a successful career where you've just made $1 million to, delivering pizzas and being at rock bottom. Nobody, wishes that upon themselves. But when the circumstances provided that necessity to deliver these pizzas, I decided I was just going to be the absolute best pizza delivery boy they ever saw, the world ever saw, right? Because if I bitched and moaned and complained about my devastating circumstances, I would only dig my pit deeper. Look, I'm the one who didn't invest wisely and securely enough to protect myself through a bankruptcy. So I created the circumstances that actually ended up in my ending up delivering the pizzas. So rather than to, complain to the universe or people around me or just allow myself to get sour on that, I said, okay, this is where I am. I'm the ultimate cause of all this, even though it was triggered by a decline in the economy in the country. So it looked like an external circumstance. But I'm the one that created the lack of financial stability. I spent too much money. I didn't invest it as wisely as I could. And so that's why I'm now having to deliver pizzas. So from that kind of like really kind of fresh kind of non-blaming kind of attitude, not coming from my mind, but from gushing from my life, I really could be the absolute best pizza delivery boy. And that attitude actually created a framework so that I didn't really have to deliver pizzas very long. All kinds of new avenues opened up because that wasn't a lesson I needed to learn. If I'd have allowed myself to wallow in that pit of suffering, I might have been delivering pizzas for months or years, But because I'd already learned that lesson and I could actually put it into action, then I didn't really need to deliver pizzas too long before all kinds of opportunities opened up for me.
What was it like to see your Moulin Rouge photograph on billboards across Paris after sleeping on train station benches?
Okay, so after I filed bankruptcy, and the way bankruptcies work, at least in California at the time, once you file bankruptcy, it takes 9 months for it to become legal. So during that 9 months, you don't have to vacate your house. You don't have to give up all your possessions. But at the end of that 9 months, the bankruptcy becomes final. And so at that point, you lose everything. So I delivered pizzas for 3 months and, because I had no money, but I still had my house, that I, as an asset. So, I was able to find a renter. A rock group from the UK was in LA to record. They needed a place for a short period of time. And so I was able to rent out my house and, get a couple of $1,000s a month income coming in. And with that, I quit my pizza delivery job and took off around the United States. I decided I wanted to become a travel photographer as opposed to being an architectural photographer, which I'd done the previous 2 decades. And so I needed all the iconic shots in America, Statue of Liberty, St. Louis Arch, Mount Rushmore. I needed all these things. So with the income that I rented from my house, I used my van, which I could sleep in at nights, and travel around the country. I had now cash to pay for the gasoline and film and all this sort of thing. And so, I did exactly that during that 9-month period. I just photographed all the iconic travel destinations in America so that I could build up a portfolio that I could submit to stock photo libraries and start to begin to develop an income. But when the bankruptcy concluded, I lost the house, I lost the van, I still had some, expensive equipment. I sold a massive telephoto lens for about $5,000. And with that $5,000, since I was, that wouldn't get me very far trying to rent an apartment or something, I decided to invest that $5,000 into a Euro pass and film and head off to Europe. Maybe it would last me a few months, and maybe by then the stock photo royalties would start kicking in. So off to Europe I went, photographing the Eiffel Tower and Big Ben and all these things. And the Moulin Rouge, which is in Paris, is another iconic tourist destination. So, but by then my $5,000 had been depleted, and I really had no money for food, and I found myself panhandling on the streets for, a few coins to be able to buy a baguette to eat, and I would sleep. I found myself, when I ran out of money, sleeping on a hard bench in a train station because, they were open all night and people were snoozing on benches anyway, so I could kind of not get caught, as a vagrant or anything. And so that particular evening, I just photographed this, what turned out to be an amazing image of the Moulin Rouge at twilight with deep blue skies and all the neon lights. And the Moulin Rouge is a windmill, so the spinning windmill. It was really, captured in a way that could really be an iconic shot. And I knew that, this image had a potential of earning tens of thousands of dollars. But at the moment, I had no money for food and no money for a hotel, right? So from that kind of the hardship involved, was harsh, but I knew I had this potential winning image, right? And so years later, this image did go into Getty Images, my stock photo library, and it was successful over time and over the next few years. I did earn tens of thousands of dollars with this image. So years later, 6 or 8 years later, I came back through Paris. This time I was flush with money because I'd been making all this money with these types of images. And, the rhythm in my life was such that this one week that I showed up in Paris, I discovered that Moulin Rouge picture had been purchased by an entertainment magazine, Le Spectateur. And they advertised by putting the cover of their magazine on all the kiosks and all the billboards in town, hundreds, maybe thousands of them lining subway walls and everything. So, when I arrived in Paris, there's my photograph plastered over the entire city for literally millions of people to see. It was only up 1 week, and that was the week that I showed up. At that point, it was validation that the struggle, not complaining, sleeping on that train station bench, not complaining, when I had to panhandle on the street for money for food, knowing deep in my life that I had created a kind of a, masterpiece that would ultimately, I just knew already this image was going to be incredible. But this was validation, actual proof right in front of my eyes. So it really was reinforcement that no matter what kind of difficult circumstances we might find ourselves in, if we can find ways to create value in my situation as a photographer and an artistic kind of approach to life, to create value with my imagery, and to create that value despite my circumstances, no money, no place to sleep, despite that, still challenging myself to create that value, that would definitely manifest. And so that gave me, this actual proof gave me the conviction and the belief in myself. It reinforced it, that, whenever I might encounter other difficulties in the future, all I had to do was to not complain about it, but to find ways to create value with things that I could do. And, I built up this internal trust in my life that it would manifest. And so that actually made it easier, would make it easier for anyone to battle through the difficulties instead of complaining about them, to somehow create value with them. So it reinforced what had already been developing in my life for decades at that point.